Hello, I'm Dan Batard. This week we're going to be talking to Dan Patrick. He has been a pillar of professionalism throughout many years in sports broadcasting. He's one of the few to be able to make the exodus outside of ESPN and create something that's interesting. I want to talk to him about ESPN, about some of the things that have happened in his career. He's got some great stories, so many great stories that we will end up talking to him too long, probably too long to keep it to just this episode. But if we go a second episode, I'm telling you that it's going to be worth it. If we decide to break this into two parts, we'll make that decision at the end of it.
You know, it was really hard making this into one part. And you know what else is hard? Hiring the right people, Dan.
Excellent segue, Mike.
Transition.
I've heard from all my friends that own a business how difficult hiring may be, and I've actually told them they should go to ZipRecruiter.com/beach. And they ask me, why, Mike? And I tell them, because ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the world's leading job boards, and they don't stop there. No. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find the people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. You get the best of the best with ZipRecruiter, and that's what I love so much. They make hiring easier than anyone else in the industry.
You agree, Chris.
Did you say
agree.
They scan thousands?
Thousands.
Wow.
They do their due diligence over at ZipRecruiter.com/beach. That's BEACH. It's really important that you do that for us. So go ahead and do that for us. If you want to check out ZipRecruiter, make sure you check out ZipRecruiter.com/beach. I'm telling you, this is a practical website, and you could try it out for free if you go to that web handle, ZipRecruiter.com/beach.
No need to yell at these people.
ZipRecruiter.com/beach. ZipRecruiter, it's the smartest way to hire.
So do that for us if you want to support what we're trying to create around here, which is more content for you that is free. Also, subscribe, rate, and review. He's had a really interesting career, and I don't think many of you have heard him this way. Let's talk to Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick with us. He's one of the most famous voices and faces that you've seen anywhere in sports broadcasting for a long time. Pioneered the ascent of ESPN and has basically been taking whatever job he wants since then. Loved his work. Remember years ago, Dan, I tell this story all the time because you didn't think 15 or 20 years ago that you could do a radio show, do a successful daily radio show because you didn't feel like you had enough opinions to do sports radio the way everybody else was doing it.
Yeah, and I looked at it back then, Dan, because, and I even said to you, you're a columnist. You have to put something there. It has to stick on the wall, or at least you hope it does. That's what we have. Modern-day columnists now are just people who are giving hot takes, it feels like. But I was in a position doing SportsCenter where my opinion didn't matter. It wasn't supposed to be part of the program. And I think because of that, it was difficult to make or feel like I can make that transition from let's just do the highlights, give you the news, to now let me give you my opinion about those highlights and the news. I wasn't programmed that way because I was brought up at CNN where the product was more important than you. You just were the conduit. And that's why I remember saying that to you.
Through that prism, I'm curious, you probably don't like where ESPN has gone, right? Because it's become more and more of columnists on television, more and more about debate. And, you know, back then on ESPN2, Olbermann was trying to make a different kind of sports experience. My guess is that what is in front of you today is not anything like the ESPN you recognize.
No, because it feels like it's, if you don't have a hot take, you know, you're in the minority. And there are times when it comes to a topic where I just tell my audience, I don't have a formed opinion right now. Because if you approach it the other way and you just say, well, I got to have an opinion on it, it just happened. That's when you get into trouble. And that's where I think it's dangerous. I also think that word source, or it just feels like everybody's got a source now, or sources. And I just don't believe that that's true. It feels like a source could be somebody else who said something on another show, so you got a source. And back when I worked at ESPN, and I know I sound like the get off my lawn guy, but you had to have verification from a couple of sources. I mean, the newsroom, it was predicated on that. I just think it's loose now. And people will say something on ESPN and other shows where it feels like even their own other shows that do news don't quote them or don't even use it as information. And I think that we've sort of morphed into that now where it's almost commonplace. Just throw something out there. Who cares? Throw something out there on LeBron, Brady, maybe Lonzo Ball, LeBron again, somehow, some way, Anthony Davis, and then you got a show. And I always encourage people who want to do this. There's so much more out there. Don't follow suit with just what everybody else is doing because it's not the right way. It may make you rich. It may make you popular. But in the end, that's really not what we're supposed to be doing.
To be fair, though, it still has its journalistic arm. There are plenty of people still doing the journalism that you crave. It's just that they've got a lot of channels. They've got a lot of sports programming. And so from 4 to 6 every day, they put on the gas bags because we're cheap programming.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of writers that I respect, and I grew up loving the printed word. So I appreciate when somebody does their job, when they write something that's enlightening. So it's not, I don't mean to throw a big umbrella over the 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern time slot on the mothership because there are other shows. It just feels like here's a hot take, but it's a hot take because this guy's trending. You're not covering all the sports. You're really covering 3 or 4 topics, it feels like.
When did you have the most fun in your career? I suspect you're having a great deal of fun now, but where do the 90s at ESPN rank within that?
I don't know if I allowed myself to have fun back then. I was still kind of trying to find myself. I was trying to match wits with Olbermann, fit in with Berman. I knew Stuart Scott was on my heels. I sort of grew up as an athlete in that way. I was insecure. Like I knew somebody was practicing. I knew somebody was better than me. It just drove me. And I don't know if I ever relaxed to say, sort of made it. I remember Keith and I were on the cover of TV Guide, if your audience even remembers TV Guide. And it's the first time when I thought, oh, my God, there are people watching. Because we weren't promoted in the way that they are now or even in the last 15 years. I had to go to management, and I had to say, can we promote SportsCenter? Now, this is going to sound crazy to you, but I remember going to John Walsh, my boss, and he said, John, we shouldn't take it for granted that people are just going to watch SportsCenter all the time. We should promote SportsCenter because we did all these other shows, NFL Countdown, and everybody got their shows promoted, and we didn't on SportsCenter. And so that's when we started the This is SportsCenter commercials. And Keith and I got yelled at one night because we were making it about ourselves, at least management said, and calling it the Big Show. Well, we called it the Big Show because we didn't know the ratings. We were laughing at ourselves, mocking ourselves. But management and the other SportsCenter anchors thought we were seceding from the union. And so I said to my boss, I said, we don't know the ratings. Like we're not a really big show, as Ed Sullivan used to say. So then they go, you're going to say this is SportsCenter as you go to break. So that's all we needed. Because if that's what you want, we were going to give it to you. So
we will give you the fact this is SportsCenter.
Oh, did we ever? So it'd be like, coming up, this and this and this and that and that and that, this and this and this. This is SportsCenter. So it was like, okay, so that's how the This is SportsCenter ad campaign started. So I don't know if I was ever comfortable enough to enjoy it as much as I should have in the moment. But these last 10 years, 11 years since I left ESPN, it has been the best. It's been an epiphany. So I've learned to laugh at myself, to not be as competitive, and be more confident in doing these shows and having an opinion. But it took time.
Dan, you got to be shitting me. I am stunned to hear. I've always imagined you as the most polished of TV personalities. The idea that insecurity would be roiling within you, and Stuart Scott is at my heels, that seems crazy to me.
Yeah, but sometimes you create something to motivate you. Like I needed to motivate myself. There has to be something there. And so I'm imagining that Stuart is gunning for the 11 o'clock, which he was, and Rich Eisen was there. Olbermann was different than me. So to try to compliment Keith, so it was a good show instead of a competitive show. I mean, I watched every single SportsCenter I did, Dan, for 2 years. After it was done, I would take the large VCR tape, go as soon as the show ended, I would get it, go upstairs, and then I would put it in a machine, and I would watch. And I kept watching for what I wasn't doing instead of what I was doing. And it stopped one day when Olbermann came by, and he goes, "You got the job." And then he kept walking. But his point was, you had made it. But in my mind, I don't know, I never allowed myself to think, hey, you made it, because I was worried then I would be off my game. I would not have that edge. I wouldn't attack things. And I had seen it happen. You know, I thought Chris Berman got to a point where Chris leveled off because you start to believe that. You know, there were other people around there. And I speak fondly of Chris because without Chris, there is no SportsCenter. And so I noticed even with great ones, they level off. And I just never wanted to. Like, I still cringe over interviews. I'm still disappointed I didn't ask Nick Foles on the podium with his daughter right there a question about his little girl in his arms after the Super Bowl. It still bothers me. Now, that's messed up, but these are the things that bother me.
Well, I wonder, too, though, because you couldn't have known at the time, holy shit, I'm in a murderer's row of broadcasting talent. Like, it's not, you're looking around the room and there are guys who are your peers, who are as good as you are. And so I can see why that might be something that would change your perspective, because you're looking at a landscape and you realize that the 10 guys around you are really good, really, really good also.
But the lineup, Dan, was incredible because Charlie Steiner, you had Robin Robertson, Bob Lee on the 6 o'clock. You had Keith and I on the 11. You had Chris Myers at one point. Tirico was in there. You had Rich Eisen in there. Stuart Scott in there. That's pretty impressive. And so you were kind of holding on, not for dear life, but, you know, I wanted to be tethered there because my dad always said to me, it's about longevity. That's always think longevity and, you know, have a shelf life because your business is really tough. And it didn't dawn on me until I was there because you could have sort of comets, you know, people were flying into the stratosphere and you're going, oh my God, you know, they're going to be the next star. And I had to find my level there because I worked with Bob Lee. Then I worked with Keith, and then I worked with Kenny Mayne. Those were the three main guys I worked with, all three completely different. So it was up to me to be maybe a little funnier with Bob Lee or a little lighter because he's more serious. With Keith, I had to play a little more the straight man. And then with Kenny, I had to be sort of the pseudo-journalist there. So there were a lot of things going on when I was there at ESPN, and somehow survived for 18 years. Should have left after 15 because I wasn't getting any better. But they allowed me a great opportunity that I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now without that opportunity.
During that time period, who was the anchor who was met with the most resistance from the other anchors? Was it Stuart Scott because he was doing something that was different, or was it somebody else?
No, it was Keith for a variety of reasons, but Keith kind of marginalized himself a little bit there with people. He wasn't afraid to tug on anybody's cape, let's put it that way. He wasn't afraid to send a missive to management. And if he was on your team, he's the best teammate you could ever have. But if he wasn't on your team...
Look out.
Yes, but, you know, it was unique to be... You're there 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week, and you're with somebody 8 to 10 hours a day. You're with them more than you are your family. And then we started to get some notoriety, and management pushed back. They didn't want, as I was told directly, we don't want another Berman. Stewart, I think people probably didn't look at as seriously as they should have. I think they sort of looked at him as, hey, it's late night, and he's just kind of throwing out some interesting jargon that nobody else is, or terminology. But Stewart was really serious about all of this, extremely competitive. We played a flag football game, Dan. He taped up his ankles for a flag football game. That's how serious he was. But I loved it because he kept you on your toes. And I tell people people mention, and Stuart and I did not have a good relationship at all because he was competitive. I was competitive. He wanted the 11 o'clock. But I said through all of it, if you listen to what he is saying, not, can I get a witness from the congregation or any of that? He threw in more information than any other anchor I worked with. And so that was always lost because I tell people, I know everybody thinks you have to have a catchphrase to be successful. Get rid of that nonsense. What are you telling people? How are you telling them? Did it get to the point where Stuart was, a balloon that just kept floating up into the atmosphere? Yes. And they allowed it to happen. But when he did a show, he wanted to dispense information. He wanted to be the smartest guy. And I always appreciated that because he worked hard in being really, really informed.
I'm not trying to put you in a position where you're ripping Olbermann, okay? So we will avoid that. I just want to understand what it was like to work with him because television relationships are really tricky. I'm curious, how much tension was there?
Zero.
Is that right?
I'm telling you, and it shocks people. I have people in my family tree who hate Keith because they're Republicans. Part of them are still angry at me because I worked with Keith or something happens with Keith. I'm answering for Keith now. And but I defend him this way. When you got on doing live TV, there is nobody in this business who is better or has been better than him. He had an ability to write. He could be as deathly serious or as whimsical or lighthearted. He could be a variety of things. He was probably as well-rounded on the air. Off the air, we didn't spend a lot of time together outside of work. We never talked politics because people go, was Olbermann always this way? And I go, no. I remember talking politics with Keith one time, and my son's middle name is Winston after Winston Churchill. The next day, he brought in The Last Lion, a book on Winston Churchill. And it was just kind of typical Keith going, thought you might enjoy this, DP. And then that was it. But he championed people. He championed the women there. He wanted equal rights with people. He wanted equal pay with, he did a lot of things. It wasn't, but it got to the point where management didn't know how to deal with him. So they would talk to me to talk to Keith. And I just didn't want to play that role. And I could tell after about 4 years, he mastered it. If you look at the guy, Berman mastered SportsCenter. Fowler was good on SportsCenter. Tirico did it. They all left. I was sort of the last one, and I'm like, wait a minute, where is everybody? But Keith mastered it, and I think he needed another challenge, and that's why he left to go to Fox, because now he wanted to challenge me. And I told him when he left, I said, you'll never have this again. You'll never have a partner like this again. But if you're coming after me, bring your lunch, man, because game on.
My list, and it's just small quibbles in terms of people I've seen on television who are just impossibly smooth, and you're among them. I am awkward on television. I am not good at the mechanics, but the only people I would put in Olbermann's class are Cosell and Costas. Bob's
a different cat though, because Bob is smooth, prepared, always polished. Keith would be a little bit more along the lines of Cosell, but Cosell was saying things. It felt like you weren't quite sure if he actually had lunch with Reggie Rucker earlier that day. But Keith, I guess for their impact, if you're looking at impact in this business,
but that's not, no, I'm just talking about smoothness on television, but you've got a better angle at this than I do, because I marveled at Costas' ability to interview Jerry Sandusky on a moment's notice. To me, what he does on television is impossibly smooth, but you have a different angle than I do, and you know more than I do about this.
No, and I go back to when Bob did his show later, and the reason why I loved it is he had all walks of life. So if it's Jimmy Breslin or Tom Petty, like that ability is what I take pride in. I want to be able to interview Gore Vidal, or I could interview Bruce Pearl, but to be able to get things out of you. And Bob has always been quintessential person to be able to do that. His smoothness at the Olympics, that's where I knew there was a separation between us. Now, obviously, people are going to say, oh, you're full of yourself if you think you're that close. In my mind, that's when I realized that was something I couldn't do as well as Bob.
That cannot happen to you very often. You're really good at this, Dan. That can't happen to you very often.
But all it did is say, work harder, man. It didn't have the negative. It had more of an enlightening. And Keith was that way, too. His writing, I marveled at. His ability to crank out something. He could write an entire show in 30 minutes. When Mickey Mantle died, he said, this is our lead story. So we're trying to convince producers who are 25 to 28, this is really, really important. Mickey Mantle, more than a baseball player, died. Like a generation died. Like your dad, part of your dad died. Like we got to do something really big on Mickey Mantle. And I just remember Keith sort of went into his lab and just cranked out something, and it was just awesome. It was brilliant. Together, you collaborate with something, and that's what's different. Cosell wasn't a collaborator. Costas is not a collaborator. Bob is a singular, so is Cosell. Keith can be singular, but when he collaborated, it was, he was a great team player. So I don't know if that answers your question. They're all unique. Stephen A. Smith has taken on more Cosellian aspects to his style than Keith ever did. But, as far as smoothness goes, he's never introduced as Bob. He's always Bob Costas. It's like he walks in and you just think that he could have a microphone in his pocket.
Is there another duo that you look at? Because you and Olbermann were as influential as a comedy team as any we've had in sports broadcasting. Who's a close second place in your mind?
Oh, Jay and Dan from TSN in Canada. Mm-hmm. When they were on Fox, if they had been on SportsCenter instead of on Fox where they didn't know how to use them, I just thought that they had a wonderful, unique approach. And people said, well, they're sort of borrowing. That's okay. I'm sure we're borrowing too. And then I met them, and I just enjoyed them. I thought that there was a fun approach to them. And had they been on SportsCenter, I think they really could have been stars. I don't see like Van Pelt is by himself now. The 6 o'clock kind of has rotating. Like SportsCenter's not tuned in to SportsCenter because such and such is doing it. We were lucky in that time. We had games that led into us, Sunday Night Baseball or Big Monday. So we had an audience that was going to sample us, and they hadn't seen the highlights. So when we got those highlights, they were just ending. And I'm going to guess 60% of the time we probably didn't see the highlight before it went out on the air. We're reading the shot sheet of the highlights in real time that you're watching it. So there was danger. It was fun, unique, but it was a different time. To do it now, it's really hard to do it now and have a team where somebody's going to go, I got to watch that. I got to tune into that. So I don't mean to sound like a prima donna. I just don't have that tune-in factor.
No, and it's thinned out. It's thinned out. There are too many places where people could get their content now. ESPN was the only place people were going, and you guys were the only ones doing it that way.
Yeah.
Like, you are the genesis of all this stuff. I'm just curious as to when it is that you realized, walking anywhere, any airport, any moment, when you said, oh, this is a lot bigger than I thought it was. This isn't some small thing we're doing in Bristol, Connecticut. The reach on where it is we've arrived startled you.
Yeah, it did. I think when we did the ESPYs in the embryonic stages, and I remember Bill Murray was hosting. So Bill Murray says to my boss, hey, can Dan Patrick sit in on our creative meeting? And I had been out with Bill. That can be mind-blowing in itself. And so I'd been out with Bill one time. The story was I'd played golf at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And so Bill got me in and said, why don't you come out and play? I come out and I play in the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And then I go back to Bristol. And then we were going to go out on a pub crawl, an A to Z pub crawl in New York. Gary Miller was heading it up. We were meeting at the Odeon in downtown Lower Manhattan. So Gary goes, well, why don't you call your best friend Bill Murray? And I go, I will. So Bill has an 800 number, so you have to call it, and then they send a message to him. They said, hey, doing a pub crawl, A to Z. If you and your brother Johnny want to join us, we're at Odeon, and we're leaving at 7:30. 7:45, 7:50, 8 o'clock, and then everybody's giving me shit. Yeah, where's your friend Bill Murray? Bill walks in with a bottle of champagne, and he has 2 glasses, and he goes, am I late? And then silence. Everybody's looked at me like. So we go on this pub crawl, and Bill nearly gets into a fight. We try to steal a street sweeper, one of those big machines. The driver is in a deli, and Bill says, "You want to get in it?" We get in it, and we're trying to pull away, and the guy's running after us. So I've had some fun moments with Bill, but when he said, "Can you sit in and help?" with the creative on the ESPYs, then it kind of hits you a little bit. And then you would start to meet people when you went out, because you're cordoned off from the rest of the world in Bristol. I'm not meeting anybody about anything. And I just remember when I went out to cover the finals with Jordan, people knew the show and there was respect. And so that was, then you start to realize there are people watching. And I don't think I wanted to think it. We did it for the people who were in there in the building. And a lot of our jokes were inside, because you don't want to go, boy, such and such is watching now. I remember Shaq's dad called me after a show saying, how can you misspell my son's name? Well, it's over my shoulder. They misspell O'Neal, and Sarge yells at me as if I'm typing that up. So then you're going, okay. But it was great, because then you had to go, you got to be great every night. Bring it every night. But that's what comes along with the territory.
Dan, forgive me. Did I hear you right? Bill Murray almost got into a fight that night? Is that what you said?
Luke Perry of 90210. He's a heartthrob, 90210. He's at the corner of the bar. So we're not even halfway through the alphabet on this pub crawl. This guy says to Bill, he's like, hey, Bill, man, you're my favorite. And Bill goes, hey, man, you're my favorite. And then the guy goes, are you f***ing with me? And then Bill goes, are you f***ing with me? And then all of a sudden I realized, now this guy wants a piece of Bill. So Luke Perry is by himself at the end of the bar, and I'm trying to drag Bill out of a bar. I think it begins with the letter K or L. I don't know what. But so fast forward to get Bill out, and then we're separated. And so the next day, I get a message. He calls me, and he said, hey, we're at letter S. Where are you? So, he and his brother Johnny got out of town. A couple of days later, in page 6, it talked about Bill nearly getting into a fight at the pub crawl. So I've had fun moments, unique moments with Bill. He's different.
Among all these things that you've done, because you've chosen some cool projects since leaving ESPN, and you've been offered some cool stuff. Now, could you be Drew Carey right now? Would you have been the lead guy on Price is Right?
If I wanted it. I don't know how game shows work when they're trying to hire or they're auditioning, but when I believe it was Cavs, Spurs, and I got a call, and the person said, would you be interested in hosting The Price is Right? And then I go, how'd you get my number? And then I have no idea how to answer this. Well, we want to hire you. Like, the job is yours. And I said, well, what am I getting paid? Wait, tell me more about this. They said, we'll tell you your salary if you agree to take the job. And I go, wait a minute. And then I'm thinking, I look down and it's a Los Angeles number. Like I have friends who would do this to me. They'd with me. And I go, okay, yeah, sure. All right, I'm interested. And they go, great. We want to build a set. We hear you're traveling to San Antonio. We want to build a set just to see what you look like so we can show it to other people higher up. I go, wait a minute, hold on. I'm going to go cover the NBA Finals. You were going to build a Price is Right set. Yeah, and they're going along with me. Going, right. Wait, and then I'm going to do what? Plinko? Well, like, what am I doing? We just want to see you on the set and how you would interact with guests. And I said, no, wait. And I don't know my salary. And they go, no, we can't release the salary until you take the job.
That's great.
So I said, I can't take the job. I can't. And then it wasn't long after that Drew Carey got the job. And then I was like, good for him. I'm glad he got the job.
Is there anything that you regret in that, or just you can't know what you're even regretting? But that doesn't seem like a very professional way to replace Bob Barker.
No, and they said, Bob signed off on you replacing him. He'd be honored if you. And I'm thinking, this thing is so far down the road. It was so far down the road, they forgot one thing, and that was to see if I wanted to do it. But if they would have handled it differently, then I probably would have been more open-minded to it. But it's not that I didn't think I could do it. It's, do I want to continue? Would I want to continue to do it? Would I be challenged in that? And the answer is no. Although I did learn that it was a $10 million a year job. So other than that, yes. So I tell my wife, she's like, oh, you wouldn't have enjoyed that. She goes, did you ever find out how much the salary? I said $10 million. She goes, oh, you could have enjoyed it for $10 million. Like, holy shit. I just turned down $10 million. God. And then I had to be on some mailing list because I started to get, what was the other one? Price is Right. Let's Make a Deal.
Wait a minute. You became the go-to game show guy.
Yes. I started getting all this.
You're the guy who turned down $10 million from Price is Right. Now everybody wants you.
Yes. So the strangest thing was, at the height of my popularity, if you want to call it, at ESPN, I met with Michael Davies, who was this brilliant guy. He's the Men in Blazers, one of the Men in Blazers. So brilliant executive producer, flies me out to L.A., want to meet with you. I got a game show for you. You're the perfect guy. I say to my wife, hey, I'm going to go out and meet with this guy. Do you know him? No. I'm going to Century City, and I'm going to meet with him, and he's got a game show for me. Okay. So I get out there. I start watching Japanese game shows over and over, different ones. What do you think of this one? What do you think of this one? I'm going, I can't move to Japan. Wait, like, what is going on? I don't know what's going on. And I said, but what do you want me to do? He goes, oh, I want you to be the host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, okay? But I got to get Regis another job. So, okay, he drives me crazy, calls me all the time. Did I get the job? And I said, okay, so when are you going to tell Regis, and will ESPN let me do this? Yeah. It's in the family. ABC is, yeah, you're good. Okay, so I'm going to do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you're going to get another game show for Regis. Yeah. And then he pops in another Japanese game show, starts talking, and then I end up leaving, fly back home. I don't hear from Michael Davies ever again. Regis Philbin pops up, and everybody's talking about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I don't know how many, it's been a few years, but it was probably 10 years after he said I was going to be the host. His secretary said, Michael Davies would like to call you back. He has a game show for you if you're interested. And I'm thinking, okay, somebody's really messing with me. I said, would you tell Michael Davies you? And then she goes, well, hold on. So Michael Davies gets on.
Hold on. Wait a minute. She says, hold on. I don't want to relay that message or what?
Yes. And And he's like, I got this game show for you, and you'll love it. And I said, Michael, where the f*** have you been? Oh, don't get caught up in. I said, you told me I had the job. And he goes, I know, I had to give it to Regis. I said, couldn't you just call me and say you give it to Regis? Oh. And then he wanted me to do some game show on TBS or something. And I said, no, I'm not interested. I'm not in the game show business. And then I finally had him in studio with the Men in Blazers because he's a very bright, funny guy. And we laughed about it. I mean, I didn't laugh as much as he probably thought I should have. It wasn't as funny as he thought, but, the two where I said, you. Yeah, I got a great game show for you. Yeah.
Too much good stuff here to keep it to just one episode. So go ahead and subscribe, rate, and review so you could be among the first to get part 2 with Dan Patrick. It's all good stuff. I promise you that you're not going to regret doing this. Subscribe, rate, and review. We'll talk to you next week.